The Israelis say that they are under the threats of the Arab countries to destroy Israel. That is nonsense. The Arab countries are under the threats of Israel to be destroyed.
Præsident Gamal Abdel Nasser, trods talrige anslag, den leder, der har været længst ved magten i noget mellemøstligt land. Siden midten af 50'erne har han altså ikke blot været Egyptens leder, men også førstemanden i hele den arabiske verden. Og han har gang på gang spillet en afgørende rolle på den internationale politiske scene. Han er omstridt som få. For nogle er han den store reformator, bannerføreren i kampen mod indenlandsk og udenlandsk undertrykkelse. For andre er han urostifteren, manden, der forhindrer fred i Mellemøsten. Vi befinder os i øjeblikket i Cuba-paladset i Kairo. Det er præsidentens officielle arbejdsplads. Og her ved siden af mig er han, manden, der har været centrum i Mellemøsten i 18 år. Mr. President, in a recent interview, the Israeli Premier Golda Meir said that there are nobody else in the world except the Arab leaders who wants to destroy another people. The Israeli propaganda has also often claimed that. Do you want to destroy Israel and the Jews?
Well, the Israeli leaders always say that about the Arabs. But you can have a look about all my speeches for the last 18 years. Nothing was said in these speeches about something like that. All what we wanted, the rights of the peoples of Palestine, who were expelled completely out of their land, deprived of their properties. These were 1 million. Now, of course, after the occupation of the Arab territories by the Israeli army, we want the withdrawal of the occupied forces from our territory. Let's say the Israeli forces.
But you have said formally that Israel was an artificial state, and also that it didn't have a natural sovereignty. Is that correct?
Nothing was said.
On which conditions are you willing to conclude peace with Israel?
Well, we have agreed about the implementation of the United Nations resolution of November 67. And these are the conditions. From our point of view, we want the complete withdrawal of the Israeli forces from the occupied Arab territories in Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. Then, according also to the United Nations resolution, the rights of the Arabs of Palestine, that is the resettlement of the refugees or compensation, as it was said in the United Nations resolutions. Well, the other parts, arrangements for peace, we agreed about that. The right of each country to live, the integrity, the recognized and secured boundaries, the right of Israel in the navigation in Suez Canal and the Gulf of Aqaba.
Are you willing to establish diplomatic relations with Israel if Israel withdraws and a solution is found to the Palestinian problem?
Well, of course, we cannot say something about if now, because, you know, we have now bitterness. Our people are killed every day. We are subjected to attacks. Our cities were subjected to attacks. Our children were subjected to attacks by the Israeli airplanes. So I don't think it is the time now to speak about diplomatic relations.
Do you think the possibilities for peaceful settlement are bright now?
No, I don't think so. Because the Israelis are not really aiming for peace. They aim for expansion. The leaders of Israel have stated, nearly all of them, their objectives and their views, their ambitions. They want to have Jerusalem, Beit Lahem, Hebron, Gaza areas, parts from Sinai. Well, there will be either peace or expansion.
The Israelis have offered the Arabs peace, but they want direct negotiations first. I know that Your Excellency has formally said that you would not participate in direct negotiation, but will you participate in indirect negotiations?
Well, what is really the Yaring mission hearing mission was indirect negotiation, was to talk with us and talk with Israel. This was the United Nations resolution. We could not at all sit with the Israelis while they occupy our land and talk and negotiate, because the Israelis will be in the position of strength. Well, you were occupied during the Second World War, and well, anyone of your country can ask himself, is it possible, or was it possible to sit with the Nazis when they were occupying your territories and negotiate, and about what they negotiate? Now they say that they want peace and they want negotiations, but Jerusalem is not for negotiations. Bethlehem is not for negotiation. Hebron is not for negotiation. Sharm el-Sheikh in Sinai is not for negotiation. Gaza is not for negotiation. So if we go for negotiation, we'll go to surrender.
Within which borders are you willing to recognize the state of Israel? The borders before the 67 war?
Yes, the borders where the Israelis were on the 4th of June 1967.
Would you welcome a resumption of the Young mission today?
Yes, but Yaring has asked us many questions. We answered all his questions clearly. But the Israelis refused to accept the resolution, refused to implement the Security Council resolution, and there was no answer from them. They said that they are ready to negotiate with the Arabs without any previous conditions.
Mr. President, would you accept a kind of Rhodes talks in order to solve the present crisis?
You know, we accepted what was stated in the Security Council resolution. A representative of the Secretary General of the United Nations. I don't know why they mention now Rhodes, and they insist about Rhodes.
So does this mean that you will not accept Rhodes talks?
Yes, we don't accept what they say, a system like Rhodes talks.
There has been a lot of rumors that Dr. Nahum Goldman was invited to Cairo. Was he invited?
No, there was nothing of that sort.
Would you be willing to meet him if he turned up here?
Well, he said lately he don't represent the government. There is no agreement between him and the majority of the government, and we haven't thought about that.
Do you think it would be useful at all to meet Mr. Goldman, or have some views representing the Israeli side?
We know what was said by him. He criticized the Israeli government because they insist about the continuation of the occupation of the Arab territories, but the government, the Prime Minister, said that they don't agree about his ideas, and he don't represent at all the government of Israel.
Have you any contacts with Israel?
No.
Not at all?
No, not at all.
Mr. President, why won't Egypt accept a ceasefire? Why? Why won't Egypt accept a ceasefire?
You know, we accepted the ceasefire after the aggression during June 1967. But in fact, there was no ceasefire. And you can have a look about the news from that time until now. The Israelis declared many times that they have bombarded our refineries in Suez. And if you go to this area now, Suez, Ismailia, the Suez Canal area, all the two big cities were destroyed by the Israeli air raids or bombardments. We were compelled to immigrate 500,000 people from this area in order to protect them from the Israeli hostile activities. So in fact, there was no ceasefire from the side of Israel. Last year, we said we will answer and let it be a war of attrition. Everybody forgot what was going on for more than 2 years, and they said that we don't accept ceasefire.
But would you accept a ceasefire if you could get an Israeli pledge that they would leave the occupied territories, and then a package deal could be worked out on the basis of the Security Council resolution?
You know, there were two Security Council resolutions. The first one was about ceasefire. The second one was about peace arrangements, including the withdrawal of the Israeli occupying troops. So why we accept the ceasefire alone and the Israelis don't accept the withdrawal? If they accept the withdrawal and arrangements for peace, as it was stated in the November Security Council resolution, well, there will be no need for fire. So there will be ceasefire.
May I conclude from what we have talked about until now that you don't expect peace but foresees another war?
Well, we want peace, and we accepted the United Nations Security Council resolution. Really, the Israelis don't want peace. They want expansion. They refuse to accept the United Nations Security Council resolution. They refuse to answer the questions of hearing about the implementation of the resolution.
So, but this means by nearly certainty that a war will come.
Well, I think it is our right to liberate the occupied territories. It is not only our right, it is also our duty, as it was your right and your duty during the Second World War, when your country was occupied.
When do you think Egypt will be strong enough to have a full-scale war in order to liberate the occupied territories?
Well, really, it is not a question of time, really. It is a question of preparation and ability, and I don't think now one could fix a date.
What do you think was the purpose of the Israeli bombing raids deep into Egypt?
Well, as it was said by the leaders and the writers and newspapermen in Israel, well, they were willing to force a settlement. Force a settlement means that we accept their conditions. And they thought that by air raids deep in our country, the people here will be raised against their government. But what happened was the contrary. You know, here we are an old country. Our people have 7,000 years behind them of experience and history. And the result here was more consolidation internally.
Do you think they on purpose bomb civilian targets? I'm thinking of Abu Zabal and Bahal Bakr.
Yes, of course. And I think this was as experiments. You know, they begin to raid the civilian targets and see what will happen all over the world, what will be the reaction. If it goes on easy, well, they could continue.
Why didn't Egypt retaliate? I think you, Mr. President, have formally said that if the Israelis bombed civilian targets in Egypt, Egypt would retaliate.
Well, you know, if we retaliate, we have to be sure that we'll be able to continue in the retaliation. Because if we don't continue, this will be another defeat.
But does this mean that you'll not retaliate the next time they bomb a civilian target if it comes?
Well, I don't think that it will be easy to raid the civilian targets again. But I think if there is a case like that, we have to study it case by case.
Now there have been a stop in the bombings over the Nile Delta for some time. Do you think they have fully stopped?
Well, you know, it is impossible to say something like that because whatever the air defense is strong, any aeroplane would be able to enter deep in the country. So we don't think about stopping their raids.
But now that the Israelis don't bomb the Nile Valley anymore, do you think this has something to do with the increase of the Russian help to Egypt?
Well, you know, the Soviet help to us was going on continuously in order to face the Israeli threats. And we were trying to strengthen our armed forces in order to face the hostile activities of the Israelis. Well, today I can say that we are stronger than 2 months ago, than 6 months ago.
Are there Russian pilots in Egypt?
Well, you know, we have Russian advisors. This began by the beginning of 68. Pilots for all arms, including the Air Force.
How many Russian advisors are there in Egypt now?
Well, I could not tell you the number. It is not a military secret. Anybody can have a deduction about that. But it is not a big number as they publish in the American newspapers.
Has the number increased during the latest 2 months?
You know, we were always receiving new advisors for new equipment.
This new equipment, is that the SAM-3 missiles?
Well, I cannot tell you about that because if I tell you, I will be telling the Israelis too.
Have the Russian pilots been training together with Egyptian pilots in the air?
Well, you know, we have Russian pilots to train our pilots. So,
yes, I'm asking because the Israelis say they have picked up the voices of Russian pilots.
these voices of the Russian pilots are not new here. These voices were going on now for the third year.
Will you ask for MiG-23s or have you asked for these planes?
No, we haven't asked for the MiG-23s.
Will you do it if the Israelis attack the new missile sites?
I think it will be difficult for them to attack the new sites.
You have formally said that Egypt are in need of pilots. When do you think that Egypt can match Israel in pilots?
Well, this is a very complicated question because the Israelis have 3 pilots for each aeroplane. So by that they could be able to use the aeroplane 3 times at 3 airplanes because of the pilots. We could not match them in that at all. That's why they have air supremacy all over the Middle East, because they attack by their airplanes Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt in one time.
Mr. President, who operates the new SAM-3 missiles? Egyptian soldiers or Russian soldiers?
We haven't said anything about the new SAM-3 missiles.
But are the Russian soldiers at the new missiles, let's not call them SAM-3, but then at the new missile?
Well, you know, we have Russian technicians, Russian advisors. That's what we have here, according to an agreement with the Soviet Union, as I told you, which took place 2 years ago.
You said to Eric Rouleau of Le Monde recently that Egypt is becoming more and more dependent on the Soviet Union. How much influence has the Russians in Cairo today?
Well, something was said about the Sovietization of Egypt, influence of Cairo. There is no pressure from the Soviet Union. There was no pressure at all. The pressure was always from us against the Soviet Union in order to supply us with new arms. And when we say that we are dependent on the Soviet Union because they were the only country which agreed to give us arms to face the Israeli aggression and to defend our country.
But that means that you're not at all politically dependent on the Russians.
No, we are not dependent on them politically. And they don't ask them, and they don't ask us anything politically.
But don't they try to give you advice?
You know, we ask them to give us advice. That's why we have their advisors with us here in the army. You know, after the defeat of 67, we realized that the Israelis were equipped with the new equipment which we didn't have by that time. So we were in need of the Soviet advisors to help us to have new equipment for our army and to train our troops.
Do you agree with the Soviet Union in every political matter? Are there a unity of opinions?
Between us and the
Yes.
Well, against colonialism, of course, we have the same ideas. Well, about the social systems, we are different, of course. They are a communist country. We are trying to be a socialist country.
But what about the attitude toward solving the Middle Eastern problems?
The attitude of whom?
Of the Soviet Union.
Well, of course, as you know, and it is well known that the Soviets don't agree about giving up any piece of the land to the aggressors.
In your May Day speech recently, you said that U.S. relations will be destroyed for decades, if not centuries, if the U.S. don't persuade Israel to leave the occupied territories or stop the help. Do you contemplate any specific actions?
Well, I want to tell you why I have said so. I have said so because the United States have supplied Israel with a big number of aeroplanes to be used against us. This means that they support Israel to continue occupying our territory. So we are not only facing the Israelis, we are facing the Israelis and the Americans behind them. The Americans because of their political support, because of their economical support, and because of their military supplies. So when they speak about balance of power in this area, they mean the complete supremacy of the Israelis and the right of the Israelis to raid our cities. So if the United States continue supplying Israel with phantoms and with bombers to attack us, we have to take some action in connection with that.
Which actions?
Well, we have no plans for that. We don't have detailed plans. We are consulting the other Arab countries and studying the whole question, and we are waiting the answer of the United States.
The biggest U.S. interests in the Middle East are the oil.
Yes.
Do you think an oil boycott would be a mean?
It is not only the oil, but their being here is also a big interest.
Has Mr. Nixon replied to your appeal?
No, there was no answer. They said that they are studying it.
If the U.S. continues to help Israel with military means, for instance, Phantoms, the Skyhawks, will you then ask the Soviet Union for more weapons?
Well, of course, we don't have any other solution. We have to defend our country.
May I change to the 4 power talks about solving the Middle Eastern crisis? Would you accept a solution if they found one?
Well, of course, this solution depends about our rights to regain our occupied territory and the rights of the Arabs of Palestine.
But if there was a solution, and for instance Egypt and Jordan agreed to it, what about the Syrians, for instance, and the Palestinians?
Well, really it will depend on the nature of the solution.
But Syria has not accepted the Security Council resolution.
Yes, because they thought from the beginning that the Israelis will not accept the resolution. They were right in their point of view.
But the Palestinians say that they will not accept the state of Israel.
Yeah, they said that they will not accept state based on Judaism, on racial discrimination. And that's why they say that they want a democratic country for all religions.
But the Israelis won't give up their state based on Judaism. So the Palestinians will have to continue the fight for.
Yes, but the Palestinians, according to the United Nations Security Council resolutions, they have the right to return back to their homes and their country.
But doesn't this anyway mean if Israel won't accept that the Palestinians will have to continue the fighting?
What will be the other alternative for the Palestinians?
No, I understand this, but then there won't be peace, even if Jordan and Egypt accept it.
Yes, but when we speak about peace, we must know the real interpretation of peace. Why this problem continued on for 22 years? On 48, the Israelis occupied parts of the Arab part of Palestine and refused after the armistice to take back the refugees. That's why the problem continued. If there is a solution about the Palestinian rights, if there is a resolution about the refugee problem, there will be no problem after that, and by that there will be peace.
Do you favor the erection of a Palestinian state?
Well, we haven't thought about that because part of Palestine was a part of Jordan, and I think it is up to Palestinians to decide that, and to the King of Jordan, not to me.
May I at last ask you a personal question? You have now been in power for nearly 18 years, and you have said after the 67 war that the revolution is not the monopoly of one generation. When do you intend to leave office in order to lead young people?
Well, you know, I promised after the aggression on 67 that I will continue as a president until the complete withdrawal of the Israeli forces from the Arab territory. After that, there will be new elections. But I don't have detailed plans for that time.
No. But when do you think that you will be able to compel the Israelis to withdraw?
Well, you asked me this question before. I could not give you a really detailed answer about that.
But what is your estimation of the situation? Will the summer be hot?
Well, you know, the newspapers and the newspapermen always speak about hot summer, hot spring. I don't think we have to think about it like that.
No, but I think that there was a statement from the Egyptian government recently that they have now taken the military initiative along the canal.
You know, because the initiative was always in the hands of Israel. Now it is sometimes in our hands. During the last few weeks it was in our hands. We can take offensive actions, but the Israelis also have the initiative. Today they attacked Lebanon. What's the difference between Lebanon and Egypt? There is no difference. Arab people are killed there and Arab people are killed here.
Do you see any solution to the tragical situation?
Well, the only solution is the implementation of the United Nations resolution of November 1967. The withdrawal of the Israeli forces, the solving the problem of the refugees, the rights of the Arabs of Palestine, and then the other arrangements for peace.
Do you still have a hope?